In today's video, we're going to discuss a potential blockbuster trade developing between the Vancouver Canucks and the Toronto Maple Leafs. Plus, we also have the latest talk of the Vegas Golden Knights. We have a big signing on Long Island. Bo Horvat, recently acquired by the Isles, to sign a long-term deal. Will this lead to a trade of another center within the team? Plus, we have news from the NHL waiver wire and some movement within the NHL rosters as well. All that more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a variety of NHL news and some trade talk to take a look at today, and of course a big signing which we'll discuss here in just a moment. First up, we did have a player on waivers yesterday. I didn't bring it up in yesterday's video because actually the news was not really overly covered by NHL reporters, but I did find out after recording the video that the Red Wings had placed Adam Erne on waivers for the purpose of being assigned to the minors. It looks like they're going to be getting Philip Zadina back, who's been on the LTIR and is in the American Hockey League on a conditioning stint. And it looks like they also want to bring back Jonathan Berger as well, so they want to have an extra roster spot cleared up to be able to do that. So Erne is the guy that goes on waivers, and he did clear here today. Obviously, with the All-Star festivities going on yesterday, there really wasn't much talk about somebody like Erne on waivers, but it did happen, and he's cleared and could be assigned now to the American Hockey League. We also got some updates on the NHL rosters from a cap perspective. A couple of players that we already knew about injuries, but teams hadn't officially moved them to a long-term injury reserve scenario, so they had a bigger pool of funds that they could draw upon for cap space to replace, if they can, some of these players in the lineup. So Ilya Mikheyev in Vancouver, we know he's done for the season after requiring surgery on his knee. He's now officially on LTIR. He was just on IR at the beginning. And Max Pacioretty with the Carolina Hurricanes. Of course, we know he had a long recovery, came back, was playing really well, but only got into a handful of games, and had another tear of that Achilles tendon, putting him out for the remainder of his season. So he's now officially on LTIR, so Carolina has more flexibility from that standpoint here as well. Of course, with the All-Star break coming to a close, games resume tomorrow. There should be a little bit more activity when it comes to waivers and injury updates and roster moves and that sort of thing here as early as tomorrow. We'll see. I'm sure there'll likely be some recalls and different things as teams kind of get back into the swing here after having a little bit of a break. Of course, we had a big signing today on Long Island. A recently acquired forward Bo Horvat, and New York Islanders' latest acquisition has signed a long-term deal. He's come to terms on an 8-year contract extension with an average annual value of $8.5 million. Now, of course, we know that the Canucks weren't going to come anywhere close to this. We know it was definitely going to be under $8 million for sure that the Canucks offered him. I believe it was likely well under that, probably in that 6 to 7 range is what I believe, based on reports where most of the negotiations were going after signing JT Miller. That's really the best they were willing to do. And at the same time, I guess the tricky part here for Horvat is he's having an excellent season right now, exceeding and likely going to exceed the career highs in many categories, especially in goals. And obviously that's kind of drove his value up this year. The Canucks felt it was better and more reasonable to pay him on the kind of whole body work of his career. If you look back, this is like I said, it's a breakthrough season for him, scoring at a much higher rate. Will he be able to continue at that for a long enough stretch of this next contract to make it worthwhile? That's going to be the part about this that does pose a little bit of risk for the Islanders. Of course, he's going to be able to be on a line with some pretty good players. Right now, it looks like he's going to play with Matthew Barzal. They'll put Horvat at center and move Barzal to the wing. All of a sudden, he's an excellent offensive player. That might be a good piece of chemistry there. Maybe they'll click and he'll be able to continue on. But obviously, if he regresses, there could be some risk here. Now, one good factor, there's no signing bonus money in his contract, so it's not buyout proof should things not work out on a long-term basis. Of course, because of his age, signing this contract, he's going to be, I think, around 37 years old when the contract finishes up. I would suspect it's going to be a good contract for a while, but sometimes the last few years things get a little bit different depending on where the cap is at that point in time, depending on where his production is at. Injuries can play a role. There's all kinds of things like that. So Lou was able to negotiate, give him a little bit more on the EAV, except to take a little bit of a hit not getting the signing bonus money that a lot of players really push to get. So overall, I think it's a good contract based on how he's played this year. I think it's a good contract based on him keeping that up. Obviously, like I said, he's been exceeding a lot of his averages in his career. So it's, it's important that he continue with that, or, it might seem to be a bit of an overpayment down the road. Either way, he's a really solid two-way center. I have no doubt that he'll be a good player for the Islanders for sure. But from a production standpoint, that's going to be, I guess, the tricky part. Now, there was already speculation that if Horvat and the Canucks couldn't come to terms and he hit UFA status, that the Islanders might be one of the teams in the mix, and Bo kind of confirmed that, saying that him and his wife were talking about the future. And once, he didn't really come out and say too much, but essentially that if he would have hit UFA status, that the Islanders were one of the teams that he did have in his top 5 for consideration based on what he'd heard and everything and where he wanted to go. So it certainly sounds like it's a good fit. Now, this could lead to other moves by the New York Islanders. There's already speculation, mostly from, from 2 perspectives. One, they have really a lot of centermen now, which is never a bad problem to have. It's obviously some guys can move to the wing, so it's not like they have to trade somebody. But between that and the cap perspective, there is some talk that the Islanders may consider trading Jean-Gabriel Pageau. I mean, not a given that it's going to happen, of course, but given that Pageau has been, that number 3 two-way center. Horvat certainly is a very similar type of player in that sense, but he's a much more offensively gifted forward than Pageau has been. So certainly, there's a possibility here that they could go a bit of a different route. I mean, obviously Brock Nelson can play center, Barzal can play center, but like I said, right now he's scheduled to play on the wing with Horvat, so we'll see how that works out. Horvat himself can work at center. You have Cizikas, and of course, not to mention anybody else that can come into the organization as well. So obviously Pageau making over $5 million. I had his moments, but I think it's fair to say in the last couple of years offensively that he, along with some other players on that team, some of the other veterans, have struggled and have not been putting up the offensive numbers that they were kind of hoping to go along with that kind of money. But, we'll see. Pageau has been good for them on the power play, even though the overall power play hasn't been great. He himself has been one of the better power play players on the team. So, he might be able to continue building on that. Maybe adding a guy like Horvat will really help give that new power play a new look and make it more successful longer term. But we'll have to wait and see. A lot of this is probably going to depend on how the next few weeks go. Right now, the Islanders are certainly in the mix for playoffs, but it's not a given. There's a lot of teams that are, within 5 or 6 points behind them. And of course, they don't have, like I said, they have a lot of teams. They need to win. Like, they just can't, have a so-so record here. They need to be on top of things and see some improvements. And obviously, if that doesn't happen, they could risk losing out of a playoff spot. So if the next 2-3 weeks don't go well and we're getting closer to the deadline, then maybe we see a deal like that happen sooner than later. If they're trending towards being a playoff team, I don't see Lou subtracting from this team. I see him maybe looking to make another addition or so. And then maybe if a Pageau trade was something they were going to consider just to kind of change up their salary cap implications, then maybe that's something that we see happen in the offseason. But for right now, I think it will be a wait-and-see approach. But if they do want to make a move, he seems to be one of the players that would actually have some value, not making too much money, still at a decent age. A team like Carolina certainly comes to mind as being, a perfect fit in that kind of Rod Brind'Amour kind of player. So we'll see. They also are division rivals. You don't obviously often see division rivals making trades and make each other better. So hard to say how that would work out. There's also some talk about the Vegas Golden Knights. Of course, they've been a team that had a good start to the season, but really for the last number of months, they've been about a 500 club. Jack Eichel's been struggling. Mark Stone's out after having another back surgery. And like I said, he's done for the regular season. It certainly appears he's out indefinitely is what they're calling it. The team has not officially said he's out for the rest of the regular season, but based on this, what he's having done, it just doesn't seem logical that he'd be back before the end of the regular year. Could he play in the playoffs? Maybe, but that's I don't think it's fair to say a given either. Now, one name that's surfaced as being a potential trade target for Vegas if they want to add to this team and use the LTIR pool to give themselves as best chance as possible would be a player like Vladimir Tarasenko in St. Louis. Certainly a player who's got a lot of experience, pending on restricted free agent. He does have some trade protection, so obviously he'd have to agree with that. I don't imagine too many players don't usually have issues going to Vegas, so I would imagine he'd probably be okay with that, but I can't say for certain, of course. I don't know exactly what the return package is going to cost for a guy like Tarasenko, but it's believed that St. Louis is likely going to have a lot of deals on the table and be one of the teams that are one of the bigger sellers of the deadline. At least it looks that way right now. Things could always change, but that's what indications are pointing to now. So Tarasenko to Vegas He's not going to give you the same kind of game as Mark Stone, but he can give you similar production. And at the same time, they need somebody to play with Eichel to help get him going. Maybe he's a guy that can help with that. I don't know. But I can't see Bill Foley and the Vegas Golden Knights and George McPhee, Kellen McCrimmon sitting back and not doing something to try to replace Stone to make sure they get in the playoffs and to make sure they have a shot to win a few rounds and have the best shot as possible at a Stanley Cup. We know the owner's been wanting one since they came in. He spent a ton of money trying to achieve that, and I just don't see them bowing out early because of a Mark Stone injury. So we'll see where things go. Tarasenko does make a lot of sense from that perspective. Now, I did see an article as well I wanted to discuss about a potential blockbuster deal between the Maple Leafs and the Canucks. Now, this is just one hockey writer's opinion, but it's something that I found intriguing and wanted to discuss the aspects of this trade and how it could work for both teams, and to see as a community, everybody watching this, what they would think of this kind of trade. Now, this is not necessarily something that is being discussed between both teams. I do think it's fair to say that there could be some discussions, though, around some of these players, because it does make some sense for sure. But here's kind of what this hockey writer has in mind, and I will link the article in the pinned comment if you want to read it for yourself and see. Now, a couple of players on Vancouver that they feel could be of interest to Toronto, starting with defenseman Luke Shea, of course, on an expiring contract. He could be a really cheap replacement for a guy like Jake Muzzin to give him that extra experience and grit on the back end. Obviously, a former Leaf himself could come back and try to help them win a Stanley Cup. So to me, Luke Shea to Toronto makes an absolutely ton of sense. Now, of course, he's not going to be a huge price tag, but you're probably looking at a second-round pick or something to that effect for a guy like that. Another player they feel like would be a good fit to shore up that middle or bottom six would be Brock Boeser. Boeser's at this year in 2 more years at $6.65 million. They suggest Boeser being a guy they might be able to kind of get on the cheap, so to speak, because obviously he hasn't been having a great season. Yes, he's had his struggles recently, but he's a very talented player with a knack for scoring, which is another player who could fit well in their top six. It really help round things out up there. Maybe a good fit for the John Tavares line, for example. And it has been known that Vancouver might be willing to eat a little bit of salary on that contract over the next couple of years, probably around that 25% or so mark, to knock that down, make it a little bit more reasonable. They suspected that the Boeser acquisition cost could be something similar to what we saw in the Horvat trade. I don't think it would be that much, to be honest, because you're looking at a first-round pick, a highly touted prospect and a roster player. Brock Boeser is struggling. He's making that kind of money. Honestly, I think they can get a better deal than that for a trade return on this guy. So to me, could he be a guy that the Leafs, kind of experiment with? Maybe. There might be some safer bets out there for them than Boeser, but there's no doubt that he's a talented player, has a knack for goal scoring. If he's in the right situation, with the right frame of mind, I think they can get him back going, and it could be worth the risk. But there's some other options on the market that might come, be less risky. But like I said, the contract is a little iffy to me. But if Vancouver wants to eat some money, it's certainly the only way they would ever consider it for sure. And the other player that's on the Canucks roster that could be interesting to leave, according to this article and this writer, is Connor Garland. Now, he's got 4 years left, including the current season. So this year and 3 more at 4.95. Now, Garland's the kind of player who could be sneaky productive. He could really shore up that bottom six. He's a tenacious forward. Doesn't have a lot of size, but he does play hard, does play with a lot of grit, and can be a kind of player that gets under your skin a little bit. So could be that extra factor that might help them on that third line or really secure things up. So there is an argument to be made that each player could have a fit with Toronto in their own way. Now, what kind of money are we talking about here? Well, Boeser's making 6.65, Garland's making 4.95, and Shen's making 8.50. That's a $12 million cap hit altogether. Certainly the Leafs can't afford to add that without a decent subtraction coming off their own books. Now, if the Canucks would retain 25% on these salaries, which is rumored to be something they'll consider, for example, like I know on Boeser it's been mentioned, Shea wouldn't have to retain much of anything because that's a good contract. Connor Garland's a player that if they can't trade, they might buy out in the summer. So obviously a buyout would be much more costly than retaining 25 or 30%. So if they could retain, say, 25 to 30% on the whole salaries here, you're looking at about $3 to $3.5 million that's going to come off that. So you're looking at getting the cap hit around 9 or a little bit less, depending on the exact number that the Canucks would retain. So maximum $9 million would be going to the Leafs instead of the $12 million cap hit. So going back the other way, you're going to have to include a couple of roster players to offset things here. So Alex Kerfoot comes to mind, $3.5 million, pending unrestricted free agent. Obviously, that's if you look at what would be retained on Connor Garland, then that's obviously going to be, Garland's going to make a little bit more, but their salary retention, it wouldn't be off by too much. Then it also talks about maybe a Pierre Engvall as well. The combination of Engvall and Kerfoot come out, Besser and Garland come in. That could be an upgrade. Obviously, they make more money. Besides the Luke Schenn contract, they also recommend a top young defenseman, which the Vancouver Canucks would badly want. They're probably going to ask you for Rasmus Sandin in this deal if this is going to happen. They're likely going to want a decent prospect and a first-round pick. So let's, as far as a prospect go, I know Toronto wouldn't want to include Nick Robertson or Matthew Nyes. So I'm not sure exactly which prospect could go in here. Maybe a Hervonen or an Emila or one of those guys could be the prospect. You get Sandin in there, a first-round pick, as well as Kerfoot and Engvall. And it might not even take all of that, but the problem is that the Leafs need money off their roster. So if you look at Kerfoot, Engvall, and Sandin, those three salaries add up to $7 million. So that's still a $2 million difference. That would be hard for the Leafs to take that on. They'd probably have to include even something else. And then you're looking at, is it kind of worth it at that point? They'd have to figure out a way to maybe move on from Wayne Simmons, possibly Justin Hall. They don't want to distract too much here or subtract too much from the blue line. I don't know if they want to remove Sandin and Hall, add Schenn. Not sure that's something they want to do, but it's an intriguing possibility for sure. You're looking at about, a 6-player deal, including a pick and a prospect included in there as well. So probably 8 to 9 pieces all together, trading places between these two the Canadian rosters. It's a very interesting concept with lots of moving parts. Now, I'm not convinced, though, that this is the absolute home run deal the Maple Leafs should be looking at. There's certainly an argument to say that they could add these types of players, a Luke Schenn type, sure, makes sense. A Brock Besser or a Connor Garland type, yep, the kind of player makes sense too, one or the other. Don't know that they really need both. And maybe it would only be more of a case of maybe drop Garland out of the deal, maybe go Besser and Schenn for a combination of Kerfoot, Sandin, Engvall, something to that effect. I don't know. If they take the Garland salary out of it, it would certainly be more of a savings from a cap perspective. They could get some upgrades. But at the same time, I don't know if they really want to move Sandin either. That's a tricky part. I know the Canucks are going to be looking for something like that. But maybe they keep Sandin and maybe a prospect at first, a Kerfoot, Engvall. I don't know. Some kind of combination there would have to work out. If I was going to rework the deal, I would take Garland out of it myself and just try to go with Besser and Schenn. So you get your top 6 forward, your gritty, experienced defenseman. So that's the 2 pieces the Leafs have been rumored to be wanting to add. Then you have to subtract a few parts off the roster to make the money work, and then of course some future assets to make the Canucks want to do the deal. So certainly makes some sense. But again, like I said, I found the article interesting. I want to get your opinion. Who says no to this deal? Should these teams actually pull the trigger on this kind of a total trade with 6 to 8 pieces of trading rosters and organizations here, or should the Leafs go elsewhere? I mean, the Canucks are definitely going to be selling off some of these players. There's no doubt. But is Toronto the best place for them? Or maybe is there better deals for them and better deals for the Leafs to find other assets instead? Let me know your thoughts on that potential down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, of course, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the latest news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.